There is, I think, two streams of thinking within the Aboriginal community that both liberates us from colonialism as well as helps us develop the capacity to be self-governing. I want to talk about that second stream, which is the capacity for self-governing governance. And it has to do with the fact that we're building in our community self-governing mechanisms that are not traditional, that have peripheries of traditional elements that relate to a particular program, like a mask. It looks Indian, it looks traditional, but yet inside it is a colonial program or service or whatever. I think a lot of people have called that out, and I think it's important that we continue to call that out. Not so much to get rid of the service, because we should put up with a band-aid solution rather than having nothing. Um, and that's a pretty tough thing, because how much harm is a particular service or program doing? And if we assess that, should we keep it or leave it? And if we leave it, then what do we have to replace it? The guru in program development, service delivery organizations within the indigenous community is social science, and Western social science at that, or mainstream social science at that. The metaphysics, the epistemology, ways of, okay, metaphysics is what we know, what we believe we know. And the confusion that's happening within service delivery is that what we know as Aboriginal people is not connecting with what we know in terms of the guiding principles that are being imposed upon us through the desperation of our people to get services. And so we have metaphysics that are in conflict with each other. We have an indigenous metaphysics, what we know as Native people, and we have the metaphysics of social scientists, who are usually mainstream people. Those two are clashing, and that's why there's such a tension and perhaps an ineffectiveness in organizational service delivery. Secondly, epistemologically, and epistemology is simply how we know what we know, is again defined by the values, the assumptions, the history, and the nature of social science to measure, to explain purpose, to talk about function of a certain concept or thing or program. So when you read a program delivery, there's always a goal and objectives and outcomes, things like that. That's the result of Western metaphysics, as well as how we can know what we know through how we evaluate it. And even the evaluation is done with Western versus indigenous minds. Even if a Native person does write the report, even if a Native person does do the evaluation of a program or service, it's still largely understood by non-Native, read by or reported to non-Native people, who will look at the same words that we write and understand something totally different. Hence a gap between how we know what we know and how we explain it, and how the masters in the system understand what we're trying to say. And even if the master, the system, a deputy minister or even a minister, is a native person, that native person is still accountable to provincial government or federal government system, a non-native court, Supreme Court of Canada, and everything. So, we are still very much explaining ourselves, our program choices, and how we see our programs both on reserve and off reserve as, how we see them and how we're understood about how we see them, a gap in the services. Secondly, there was a thought in my mind and I just forgot it. I'm going to pause this video and see if I can continue.